rights and violence against labor union leaders in Colombia. This is an important hearing for a number of reasons, and I want to thank the members of the committee for participating, and certainly I want to thank our witnesses for participating. It is my understanding that this hearing we will be using translators for our witnesses. It is my understanding that when we speak there will be simultaneous translation so our witnesses will understand what we're saying. When the witnesses are speaking, the translators will then translate to us. So this is going to take a little more time than a usual hearing with the witnesses, but we want to provide sufficient time so the witnesses can properly give us the information that they've traveled this distance to do so. I'd like to begin by recognizing myself for the purposes of an opening statement, and then I will recognize Congressman McKeon for his opening statement. Today, this committee meets to examine whether ongoing violence and weak labor protections are impeding the ability of Colombian workers to exercise their fundamental human rights. Sadly, Colombia has been the most dangerous place in the world to belong to a labor union for the past 2 decades. In some recent years, there have been more labor killings in Colombia than the rest of the world combined. According to the National Labor School, a leading Colombia think tank, almost 2,700 trade union members have been killed in Colombia over the past 20 years, and the number of labor union members killed last year jumped by more than 25% over the 2007 levels. It remains difficult to know who is responsible for most of these deaths because so few cases have been investigated, let alone prosecuted. The Colombian Commission of Jurists tells us that the impunity rate for these crimes still remains at a staggering 96%. At Colombia's current pace of investigations and indictments, it would take several decades to get through the backlog. This means that thousands of killers continue to escape justice. We will hear testimony today from that many labor killings have been perpetrated by right-wing paramilitary death squads whose leaders have acknowledged targeting union leaders. According to reports, many of the killings have been carried out by the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia, or AUC. Although the right-wing paramilitary groups was officially disbanded a few years ago, the demobilization process may have been unsuccessful. Some former AUC paramilitary fighters appear to be now operating within organized criminal gangs. When I was in Colombia last year, union leaders told me they were increasingly receiving death threats from a new deadly gang called the Black Eagles. Another possible explanation for the rising violence is the disturbing phenomena of extrajudicial killings. This is where innocent civilians are murdered by Colombian armed forces and are inappropriately classified as casualties of war. These so-called false positives, the deaths of these individuals, have taken the lives of thousands of Colombian citizens, including union members. We will hear testimony today of a case where a Colombian army killed 3 unarmed labor union leaders and then altered the crime scene in order to make it look as the victims had been engaged in an armed conflict. There is concern that some anti-labor violence stems from decisions by the Colombian business and political leaders. For instance, paramilitary leaders have admitted accepting money from a broad array of Colombian and multinational corporations. And President Uribe's former director of national intelligence has been accused of turning over a hit list to right-wing paramilitaries containing the names of union leaders under government protection. While Colombian prosecutors have made some modest progress very recently in securing some convictions in these labor homicide cases, important questions still remain. First, do these investigations and convictions actually find out the truth behind the murders? We will hear testimony today that prosecutors often accept motives without investigating the underlying motive. And prosecutors too often investigate with preconceived and incorrect theories of the case. One young woman who is testifying today intervened in her deceased father's investigation. She will tell us that her intervention was because prosecutors were advancing a false theory that her father's death was a result of a crime of passion stemming from an adulterous affair. Indeed, ongoing complaints about publication of inaccurate motives has led the Colombian Attorney General's office to stop issuing reports regarding motives in these cases. Second, are prosecutors conducting thorough and systematic investigations aimed at holding all those who are responsible for both the planning and the executing of the labor killings. Some legal observers say that the prosecutors are shortchanging investigations only after securing convictions of the material author of the crime. The material author is likely to be a low-level person who pulled the trigger and not one of the intellectual authors who either ordered, planned, or paid for the killing of that individual. Finally, today's hearing will inquire about additional obstacles that prevent the Colombian workers from exercising their fundamental rights. The International Labor Organization has identified significant areas where Colombia's labor laws are non-compliant with the core international labor standards. By raising these questions today, I hope that we can begin to find solutions to ensure that the backlog of murders are finally adjudicated and that Colombian workers have basic labor rights for which all workers should be entitled and should be able to exercise without fear of violence against them and or their families or their organization. Thank you very much.